Tessa Hartley didn't expect her Monday to start with a 6-foot-something man crashing into her clinic lobby, clutching his shoulder and swearing under his breath. "Are you okay?" she called out, hurrying from behind the reception desk as the front door slowly closed behind him. He looked up, his face tight with pain, but his voice was calm. "Honestly, I think I tore something." He wasn't her typical walk-in. Most of her patients were high school athletes or weekend warriors. This guy dressed in a sweat-soaked designer tee with a face that looked like it belonged on a billboard was definitely neither. "Come with me," she said, already shifting into professional mode. "I'm Tessa. Let's get you checked out." "Roman," he muttered through clenched teeth. "Roman Ashford." The name didn't ring a bell, but the way he winced as she helped him onto the padded treatment table told her enough. "What happened?" she asked, pulling on gloves and gently positioning his arm. "Pick-up basketball game." "I landed wrong," he said. "Heard a pop." "Then regret. Sounds like a rotator cuff strain," she said, carefully rotating his shoulder. "You'll need imaging to confirm, but it's not dislocated." "You're lucky. I've been told that before," he said, watching her with eyes way too amused for someone in pain. She ignored the way her stomach flipped. "Let me grab an ice pack." When she returned, he was scrolling through emails on his phone with his other hand. She set the ice gently on his shoulder. "You're tense," she said, noticing the way his jaw tightened. "I have a lot going on." "You're not the only one," she said with a dry laugh. "Try owning a clinic where the air conditioning breaks the same week 3 patients cancel last minute." His brows lifted. "You run this place?" "Every inch," she said, straightening. "Physical therapy, sports rehab, and everything in between." Roman looked around. The clinic was clean, modest, and clearly independent. "Impressive," Tessa shrugged. "It's not glamorous, but it works." "You're underselling it," he said, eyes locking on hers. She pulled back slightly, unsure how to respond. It wasn't uncommon to get flirty patients, but something about Roman was different. He didn't seem like he was trying to make a move, more like he was just noticing her. "Let me write up your treatment plan," she said quickly. "Ice, anti-inflammatories, and no basketball for at least 3 weeks. You'll need to come in twice a week for therapy." "I can do that," he said. She handed him the schedule sheet. "You can book at the front or call." He stood slowly, wincing. "I'll see you Wednesday then, Tessa." He said her name like he already knew it. She watched him walk out, the bell above the door jingling as it closed behind him. Weird, she thought. Handsome, clearly loaded, but weirdly down to earth. She didn't give him another thought. Until he came back. Wednesday, he showed up 5 minutes early. Friday, he brought coffee for her and her assistant without being asked. The following week, he arrived in a black luxury SUV that looked like it belonged in a celebrity magazine. "Is that your car?" she asked, standing by the front desk as he parked outside. He just shrugged. "I like nice things." Clearly. But he didn't act like a guy who flaunted his money. He listened during sessions. He laughed at her dry humor. He even helped clean up weights once when a teen patient knocked over a full rack. "Why do you always come alone?" she asked during his 4th session as she guided his arm through resistance bands. He glanced at her. "Why? You expecting an entourage? Most guys who drive cars like yours don't show up without a PA or a trainer." "I don't like people doing things I can do myself," he said simply. She studied him. His jaw was firm, a shadow of stubble coating his skin, but his eyes carried something else, tiredness beneath the charm. "How's the pain today?" she asked. "Better. But I'll lie if it means I get to keep coming here." "Don't flatter yourself," she said, biting back a smile. "I've had worse patients." "Have you had richer ones?" She blinked. "Is that a challenge?" He grinned. "Just stating facts." "Let me guess. Tech startup." "Wrong. Finance." "Close." "Okay. I give up." He leaned back on the table. "I co-own a private investment firm. Real estate, sports franchises, some startup equity." She stared at him. "So, You're a millionaire. He gave a small shrug. Give or take. She blinked. You're serious. Wasn't exactly hiding it. No, but she shook her head. You don't act like it. He sat up. What exactly do millionaires act like? Entitled. Loud. Obsessed with showing off. He tilted his head. Then maybe I'm the wrong kind of rich. Tessa didn't know what to say to that. She kept her focus on the exercises, but her mind was spinning. After the session, he lingered by the door while pulling on his jacket. Hey, he said. You free this weekend? She hesitated. Why? There's a charity gala Saturday night. I usually go alone, but I'd rather not this year. A gala? She echoed. Black tie, fancy food, open bar. I'll even send a car. She crossed her arms. You're asking me to be your date? He didn't blink. Yeah, I am. She stared at him. He wasn't joking. Why me? He looked her dead in the eye. Because you're the only woman I've met in a long time who doesn't give a damn about my money. Silence stretched between them. And he added, you make me laugh. Tessa felt something stir in her chest, something she hadn't felt in a long time. But still, this was fast. Too fast. I'll think about it, she said. Roman smiled. I'll take that as a maybe. And then he walked out, leaving behind the faint scent of cedar and something expensive. Tessa stood frozen in the entryway for a long moment. What just happened? She'd treated dozens of patients. None of them had done this. None of them had made her feel like this. Tessa stood in front of her closet Saturday evening, holding a silver gown she hadn't worn in 3 years and wondering what on earth she was doing. Gala. She hadn't said yes until earlier that morning when Roman called the clinic and asked to confirm her answer. His voice had been steady, not pushy, but something about the way he said her name again made her pulse trip. And she heard herself say, all right. Yes. Now she was regretting it just a little. The dress zipped tighter than she remembered, and her heels were an inch too high for comfort. But when she stepped out of her apartment and saw the black town car waiting at the curb, she realized there was no turning back. The driver opened the door without a word. Inside, the car was quiet, cool, and smelled faintly of leather and something citrusy. Roman was already inside, dressed in a charcoal tuxedo with a dark tie, his hair pushed back in a casually perfect way that suggested he hadn't tried at all. You clean up well, he said, glancing over at her as she slid in beside him. She looked down at her dress, suddenly self-conscious. I feel like I'm impersonating someone who belongs at these things. You belong, he said simply, then added, you'll see. The car pulled away from the curb, and the city lights blurred past the tinted windows. Tessa kept her hands folded in her lap, her fingers twisting the small silver clutch she'd borrowed from her sister. So, she said, needing to break the silence. What's this gala for? Children's cancer research, he said. One of the hospitals I invest in hosts it every year. She turned to him. You invest in hospitals? Only ones that run community programs. I don't throw money at things I don't believe in. He paused. I lost someone to leukemia when I was 20. Since then, I've made sure these things stay funded. Her gaze softened. I didn't expect that. He looked out the window. Most people don't. The venue was a glass-walled rooftop ballroom in Midtown, and by the time they arrived, the entrance was already flooded with gold gowns, tailored suits, and camera flashes. Roman stepped out first, then turned and offered his hand to help her. The moment she took it, the street noise dulled. He didn't say anything, didn't make a show of it. He just held her hand in a way that made her feel like she was already inside. Inside, the air shimmered with candlelight and violins. Waiters moved silently between tables with trays of champagne. A massive chandelier sparkled above the crowd like a frozen firework. And Roman bent slightly to murmur near her ear, don't worry. I've already planned our escape route if it gets unbearable. She laughed under her breath. Good. I might need it. They didn't sit immediately. A few people approached Roman, shaking hands and exchanging quick words she didn't catch. His tone changed, slightly polished, more formal, but his hand never left her back. He didn't introduce her right away. She noticed that, not out of disregard but protection. Some of them looked at her too long. One woman in a dark red dress gave her a once-over that made Tessa's spine straighten. When they finally reached their table, she leaned closer. "I don't think your crowd likes outsiders." Roman poured her a glass of water before answering. "They like what they understand. And you don't fit that." She arched a brow. "Is that a compliment?" "It's a reason I brought you." The first course arrived and the conversation shifted. Roman asked about her clinic, but not in the usual, polite way. He wanted details. How she sourced funding. How she handled insurance. What kinds of patients she prioritized. "No one's ever asked me that before," she said after explaining how she kept rates low for underinsured patients. "That's a shame," he said. "Because what you're doing, it matters." She stared at him, then glanced down at her plate. "How do you always say the exact thing I don't know I need to hear?" He didn't answer, but when she looked up, his eyes were on her like she was the only thing in the room. As dessert was cleared, the event moved into speeches and fundraising. Roman leaned in. "Want to take a walk?" She didn't hesitate. They stepped out onto the terrace where the city unfolded in lights below. Tessa leaned against the railing, letting the cool air hit her skin. "You okay?" he asked. "Honestly? I'm surprised." "By what?" "You. This. I thought this world would feel fake. But it doesn't. Not with you." He stepped beside her, silent for a moment. "I hated it for a long time. The suits, the money. Thought it made me untouchable. Turns out it just made it harder to be seen." She turned to face him. "You're not what I expected. Neither are you." The words hung between them. He was standing close now, not too close but enough. The city noise softened behind them. The air felt heavier. "I'm not good at this," she said, voice low. "At what?" "Letting people in. Especially people who live in a different universe." "I don't care about universes," he said. "I care about how I feel when I'm around you." And just like that, her breath caught. Before she could answer, the terrace door opened. A man in a silver lapel suit called out to Roman. "Sorry to interrupt," he said, eyes flicking to Tessa with poorly concealed curiosity. "You're needed inside." "Something about the silent auction." Roman gave a nod. "Give me a minute." The man disappeared. Roman turned back to her. "I'll be quick." She nodded, trying to steady her pulse. Once he was gone, she leaned against the railing again, heart thudding uncomfortably. She didn't belong here. Not really. But when Roman returned 10 minutes later, he didn't say anything. He just reached for her hand. "I want to show you something," he said. They left through a back corridor, past 2 security guards who nodded as if they knew him, and stepped into a private elevator. It rose soundlessly, stopping on a floor that didn't have a number. The doors opened to a penthouse suite. All glass and stone and sleek lines. "This is yours?" she asked. "One of them," he said. "But it's not about the place." He crossed to the far wall and pressed a button. The glass panels shifted, revealing a rooftop garden. Trees and wide planters, fairy lights overhead, and a small table set for 2 near the edge. "Why are you showing me this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Because I wanted to give you something that didn't belong to anyone else." Tessa stepped forward slowly, stunned. "Why?" He didn't hesitate. "Because you're the first person I've wanted to keep." Tessa didn't return to her apartment until after 1 in the morning, her silver heels dangling from her fingers and her head still spinning with everything Roman had shown her, not just the rooftop garden or the glittering city skyline, but the way he looked at her like she was something rare. Something he'd been searching for without realizing it. She didn't sleep. She couldn't. Her body was exhausted, but her mind wouldn't stop replaying the way his voice dipped when he said he wanted to keep her. He hadn't tried to kiss her. He hadn't even touched her face. But the restraint, the quiet certainty in his words had left her more breathless than any kiss ever could. By Monday morning, she was back at the clinic, ponytail up and feet aching in her worn-out sneakers. The air conditioner buzzed as usual, and the scent of eucalyptus oil clung to the towels stacked in the corner. She sorted files and checked in on her first patient like her weekend hadn't included a rooftop garden, a black tie gala, and a man who made her forget how to breathe. Roman didn't show up for his scheduled appointment that afternoon. No call. No message. She stared at the empty slot in her calendar longer than she should have, then forced herself to move on. Maybe he got busy. Maybe he changed his mind. Maybe she'd imagined that look in his eyes after all. But 2 days passed, then 3. And on Thursday, just as she was beginning to convince herself not to care, a delivery arrived. A single envelope. No return address. Just her name in sweeping handwriting that looked too elegant for real life. Inside was a folded piece of heavy cream cardstock. She opened it. "I need you to trust me. I'll explain everything. Friday at 7. I'll be waiting." There was no address, but beneath the note was a small black card with an embossed logo she didn't recognize, along with a name, the Bellamy. She searched it online. A private dining club. Exclusive. Members only. No public reservations. Of course it was. She stared at the screen, torn between irritation and intrigue. He'd vanished without a word, only to send her some cryptic invitation like she was supposed to drop everything and play along. But when Friday arrived, she was already dressed by 6. The Bellamy sat tucked between 2 stone buildings in a quiet part of the city. No signage. Just a sleek brass door with a discreet intercom. When she gave her name, the door unlocked with a soft click. Inside, a woman with an accent she couldn't place guided her down a narrow hallway lined with low, flickering sconces. Then, through a velvet curtain, into a private dining room lit by gold-toned chandeliers and a wall of windows that framed the skyline like a painting. Roman stood near the window, hands in his pockets, wearing a midnight blue jacket and no tie. His posture was tense, his jaw set, but when he saw her, something shifted in his shoulders. "I wasn't sure you'd come," he said. "I almost didn't," she replied, stepping fully into the room. "But I figured if you were going to ghost me, you wouldn't have done it this dramatically." He exhaled. "I deserve that." "Good. Because I brought more." "I know." He gestured toward the single table already set. "Will you sit?" She hesitated, then lowered herself into one of the chairs. He sat across from her, silent for a moment. "I didn't disappear because I wanted to," he said finally. Something came up. Unexpected. Complicated. "That's vague." "My father," he said. "He's been sick for years, but he took a turn last weekend. I had to fly out to deal with everything. The estate, the family company. It's a mess." Her expression softened slightly, but her voice stayed steady. "You could have told me. I should have. But I was afraid." "Of what?" He looked away briefly. "Of you seeing the rest of me. The part that isn't curated. The family drama. The expectations. The legacy I never asked for but can't escape." "Roman," she said, her voice gentler now. "I work with broken bodies every day. I've seen worse than family baggage." He met her eyes again. "You're not just anyone. You're the first person I've met in a long time who makes me want to be better. Not richer. Not more successful. Just more honest." She didn't speak for a long moment, letting the truth of that settle. "I'm not looking to be anyone's rehab project," she said finally. His mouth curved, not in amusement but relief. "You're not. You're something different." Their food arrived, delicate plates with names she couldn't pronounce, but she barely tasted it. The air between them had changed. Not tense. Just charged. After a few bites, he looked up again. "I want to try something. Define something. I want to be with you," he said plainly. "But not like this. Not in pieces. I want to bring you into my life. Fully. No secrets. No disappearances." "That sounds a lot like asking me to step into a world I don't belong to." "You belong wherever you choose to stand, Tessa." She swallowed, surprised by the sudden weight in her chest. "But it's not just about fitting in," he continued. "It's about partnership. I don't want someone to orbit around me. I want someone to walk beside me." The words hit somewhere vulnerable. She hadn't let anyone get close in years. Not since her ex had left her trying to hold together a failing clinic and a shattered heart. But Roman wasn't asking her to save him. He was offering something else entirely. "Say yes," he said, voice low. "Not to love? Not yet. Just to seeing where this could go." She looked down at her untouched dessert, then back at him. I don't do easy, she said. I don't want easy, he replied. I want real. And for the first time in a long time, she let herself say the one word that scared her most. Okay. Roman reached across the table, his fingers closing around hers, not possessive, just steady. Outside the window, the city kept moving. But inside that room, something had shifted. Something quiet. Something undeniable. This wasn't just a date. It was the start of something that neither of them could walk away from. The first time Tessa saw Roman lose control, it wasn't during one of their quiet dinners or in the middle of some lavish event. It was in her clinic, 3 weeks after that night at the Bellamy. He burst through the door without warning, dressed in head-to-toe black, his coat soaked from the rain. I need 5 minutes, he said, voice like gravel. She didn't ask questions. Just locked the front door, guided him into the empty treatment room, and waited. He paced once, twice, then stopped in front of her. My father left the company to me. I thought that was expected, she said carefully. He didn't leave it clean. There are debts no one knew about. Side deals. Half the board's threatening to walk if I don't agree to a merger with a group I don't trust. Her expression didn't change, but her eyes tracked every shift in his posture. What does that mean for you? It means I either let go of everything I spent 10 years building, or I fight them and risk dragging the entire company through a public war. She stepped closer. What do you want to do? I want to walk away. But I can't. Why not? He stared at her, storm still flickering in his eyes. Because if I do, I lose any control over how my father's legacy is used. And I may not have loved the man, but I'm not going to let everything he built be gutted by opportunists. She nodded once. Then you fight. Roman blinked. Even if it means dragging my name through the press? You don't care about that, she said. You care about doing what's right. That's the difference. He let out a breath, tension bleeding from his shoulders. How do you always know what to say? I listen. He reached for her then, not in desperation, but in gratitude. His hand rested against the side of her neck, thumb brushing beneath her jaw. I don't know how I ever did any of this without you. You did it alone. But that doesn't mean you have to keep doing it that way. Roman didn't kiss her then. He just leaned his forehead against hers and let the silence settle around them like a promise. Over the next month, things shifted. She didn't move into his world, he came into hers. He showed up during her lunch breaks, sometimes with food, sometimes with nothing but a tired smile and a need to sit quietly in the corner while she worked. He helped repaint the front of the clinic after a storm cracked the wooden sign. When a young gymnast panicked during a post-surgery session, he crouched beside her and talked her through it like he'd known her for years. And one afternoon, when Tessa found a letter on her desk from a local landlord threatening to hike the rent on her space by 30%, Roman didn't offer to pay it. He offered to help her buy the building. I'm not asking for ownership, he said, holding up both hands when she froze. Just leverage. If we buy it through a shell company, you keep autonomy. I'll only be on the paperwork as a silent investor. Tessa narrowed her eyes. Why would you do that? Because it's not just a clinic anymore. It's yours. And no one should be able to take that away from you. She didn't give him an answer right away. But 3 days later, she walked into his penthouse, dropped a folder with all the building's inspection records on his kitchen counter, and said, If we do this, it's on my terms. Roman smiled, not triumphant, but proud. Always. The day the sale closed, he didn't take her out for champagne. He brought her to a rooftop garden in Brooklyn, one she didn't even know existed. They sat on a bench surrounded by wildflowers and watched the sun dip behind the skyline. I used to come here when I didn't want anyone to find me, he said. Now I want you to know about it. She reached for his hand, lacing her fingers through his wordlessly. By the time autumn rolled in, things had settled on the surface. But Tessa could feel it, the tension building in Roman's shoulders after every board meeting. The way his voice turned clipped when he spoke about the merger. Something was coming. It hit on a Wednesday. He walked into her clinic just after closing, jaw tight, hands shoved deep in his coat pockets. I need to ask you something, he said. She turned from the counter, sensing the undercurrent in his voice. I'm stepping down, he said. From the firm. I'm signing over the controlling shares and walking away with a buyout clause. Her heart stuttered. You're serious? I'm done fighting ghosts. I don't want to spend the rest of my life chasing money I already have. She stepped toward him. What are you going to do? I want to start something new. Something that actually matters. He pulled a folder from his coat and handed it to her. Inside were plans, early sketches for a wellness foundation focused on underserved communities. Free clinics, rehab centers, outreach programs for injured athletes who couldn't afford traditional care. At the bottom was a name, the Hartley Foundation. Tessa stared at it, throat closing around something she couldn't name. You wrote my name on it, she whispered. It's yours, he said. I want to build it with you. Tears gathered in her eyes, but she blinked them back. You're really leaving that world behind? I already did, he said. The night you looked at me like I was worth more than a balance sheet. She laughed then, shaky and light. You're impossible. I'm yours. And then, finally, he kissed her. It wasn't rushed or explosive. It was steady, deep, a seal over every moment they'd lived through, every word they hadn't yet said. They didn't speak for a long time after that. Just stood there in the quiet clinic, surrounded by faded posters and the scent of lavender oil, holding on like neither of them ever intended to let go. 3 months later, they opened the first Hartley Foundation Center in a converted warehouse on the east side of the city. Tessa ran the programs. Roman managed the funding. They hired a team, built partnerships, and expanded faster than anyone expected. But none of that mattered as much as the moment he walked her into the space alone, before the ribbon cutting, and dropped to one knee beside the main therapy room. No grand speech. No audience. Just him holding a simple gold ring and saying, I fell in love with you the minute you told me I couldn't play basketball. Tessa laughed through her tears. You're ridiculous. But you love me anyway. She nodded, knees hitting the floor as she kissed him. Yes, I do. They didn't need a gala or a rooftop or a skyline to make it real. They had each other. And that was enough. Forever. The buzz of the crowd dulled behind the glass doors as Tessa stepped into the main hall of the new Hartley Foundation campus, her heels clicking softly against the polished concrete floor. The building smelled faintly of cedar and new beginnings, and sunlight streamed in through the skylights above. It had taken nearly a year to get here, permits, construction, hiring a full staff, but now it stood tall and real, a place where healing wasn't just a goal but a promise. Roman stood near the far end of the hallway, sleeves rolled up, his tie forgotten, talking with one of the lead architects. He looked different lately, not just more relaxed, but lighter, like shedding the weight of his father's empire had made him taller somehow. When he caught sight of her, he excused himself mid-sentence and crossed to her without hesitation. Everything's ready, he said, brushing a strand of wind-blown hair from her forehead. You're just in time. She nodded once, then tilted her head to the side. You've got paint on your shirt. He looked down at the faint streak of blue across his collar. I helped hang the mural in the pediatric wing. The artist handed me a brush when I asked if she needed anything. You? Holding a paintbrush? As long as it's not a spreadsheet. Tessa smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. Roman caught it immediately. What is it? She hesitated, then pulled a folded paper from her bag. I got the offer. He took the letter from her hand, eyes scanning quickly. His jaw set as he read. Director of Rehabilitation for the U.S. National Training Center, he said. That's in Colorado. I know. She looked up at him. It's a 2-year term. I'd work with Olympic-level athletes. Help rebuild their programs. It's everything I've worked for. He didn't respond right away. Just folded the letter again with impossible care and handed it back. When do they need an answer? End of the month. Roman nodded, then stepped back slightly. You should go. Her breath caught. You're not even going to ask me to stay? I'm not going to ask you to give up something you've earned, he said. But this is ours. We built this. And we'll keep building it, he said. But if you don't take this, you'll always wonder if you should have. I know that feeling. I lived with it for years. Tessa looked away. What if you're not here when I get back? He stepped closer again, gently taking her hand. Then I'll fly out to you. Or you'll fly back. Or we'll meet somewhere in the middle. I'm not going anywhere unless you ask me to. She blinked fast and looked up at him. You'd wait. I'm not waiting, he said. I'm living. With you. However that looks. Her voice thickened. I hate that you always say the right thing. He leaned down, brushing his lips against her temple. I learned from the best. They didn't talk about logistics. Not then. Not yet. They just stood there, holding on. By the end of the month, she accepted the position. Roman helped her pack. They didn't have a dramatic goodbye at the airport, just a quiet one, full of promises they didn't need to say out loud. He visited 3 weeks later, arriving without notice and bringing her a box of her favorite tea, a framed photo of the foundation's first patient success story, and a letter from a young gymnast who'd written, "You gave me back my legs. Thank you. You needed to see this," he said, setting the letter in her hands. "To remember why it matters." She wrapped her arms around his neck and whispered, "I never forget. They made it work. Weekends, long calls, surprise visits." And when her contract ended, she didn't renew it. Instead, she came back. Back to the city. Back to the foundation. Back to Roman. The day she returned, he didn't throw her a welcome party. He didn't plan a rooftop dinner or a private concert. He simply met her at the arrivals terminal with a ring in his hand and said, "I want to build a life with you that never needs to be paused." She didn't hesitate. She said yes before he could even finish asking. They married in a quiet ceremony at the garden Roman had once told her was his secret place. Only 20 people attended. No press. No spectacle. Just vows written in ink and sealed with the kind of kiss that didn't need an audience to be real. Roman didn't wear a tux. He wore a navy shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows. Tessa didn't carry flowers. She carried a photo of her late mother in her pocket, close to her chest. After the ceremony, they didn't leave for a tropical honeymoon. They went home, to their loft, filled with mismatched furniture, stacks of medical journals, and a dog Roman had adopted without asking because he looked like he needed someone too. Life wasn't always perfect. They argued sometimes about funding strategies, about work hours, about whether Roman's dog was allowed on the couch. But the arguments never lasted. They always led to the same place: understanding, laughter, and the quiet certainty that whatever the world threw at them, they'd face it together. Years passed. The foundation expanded. Tessa launched a scholarship program for women in physical therapy. Roman taught financial literacy to at-risk teens on weekends. They found joy in the ordinary: Sunday mornings with coffee and silence, evenings spent reading on opposite ends of the couch, hands touching even when words weren't necessary. And one spring morning, when Tessa walked into the clinic with a test in her coat pocket and tears in her eyes, Roman didn't ask anything. He just pulled her into his arms and whispered, "We're ready." They were. When their daughter was born, Roman held her like she was made of stars. He didn't look afraid. He looked reverent. They named her Clara after the first patient who ever walked again because of Tessa's work. And when she took her first steps across the garden floor 2 years later, Roman whispered to Tessa, "She's standing on everything we built." They never needed a castle, or a crown, or a billion-dollar empire. All they needed was this: a love that grew, a life that mattered, and a future they would never have to face alone.